Welcome to the 200th edition of Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Another day, another city, another massacre by an ISIS fanatic. That this time it should be in the very city where Hillary Clinton, as a senator and then as Secretary of State, did so much to succor and comfort ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria, merely makes the misery of the murders more melancholy.
The civilian victims were Argentinian and Belgian tourists mostly, but Donald Trump lost no time in seizing on the crime to further his domestic agenda. Not to blame the Bush and Obama disastrous policies, but to double down on them. He threatened Guantanamo Bay, the U.S. torture camp, menaced Muslim immigrants, although Uzbekistan isn't on his list of the banned, and generally implied that it was business as usual on the warpath.
Joining us to discuss the crime and the punishment is Erich McElroy, an American stand-up comedian and commentator of note, who is touring his latest show entitled Erich McElroy Tops Trump, there's a thought, and has the distinction of being personally blocked by the Donald on Twitter. Erich, welcome to the show. Let's start with the somber mass murder of cyclists. Couldn't get much more defenseless, ambling down a cycle highway in the middle of the day, mown down. How has that impacted on the United States? Already fearful, overly fearful actually, of terrorist attack.
Well, what's amazing to see is the reaction and how right now it's being politicized in a way that after the shooting that happened in Las Vegas, where the person perpetrating that was not able to be represented as a Muslim fanatic, where Donald Trump didn't say anything at all, didn't condemn it at all, didn't do a call for fewer guns in the United States, did nothing, but then immediately he's tweeting out things that are completely inappropriate. Well, I don't agree with them, and they're wrong for the president to say, because one of the things he said, not just sending the person to Guantanamo, which this happened on U.S. territory and with a U.S. green card holder, but also then saying that the person should get the death penalty.
Twice he tweeted it.
Yeah. So,
twice, in capitals.
But by tweeting that, that's going to be used by any defense lawyer to say, look, you've prejudiced all future juries against this man. He's pretty much guaranteed the guy won't get the death penalty by saying that. So it's just the extremes and the hypocrisy, it's astounding.
Leaving aside the fact that, from what we know of this man, he'd welcome the death penalty. He's a jihadist who is probably disappointed that the police officer who promptly shot him didn't actually kill him. So the death penalty is no kind of deterrent to a suicide bomber.
No, from any culture, anyone who's got that level of dedication, killing them isn't going to stop them or the ideology or anything else. Luckily, for once, he was captured alive, which obviously doesn't happen very much in America because we tend to shoot on sight. So hopefully we can find out if there is if there's a terror cell here, where he was radicalized, because I've seen some things saying he was radicalized once he came to the United States. You know, those kind of things that make a difference that maybe we can actually find out now, which would be good.
Thousands of people are killed. Far more than thousands, tens of thousands are killed annually in the United States by gunshot. You mentioned the Las Vegas massacre, which has unaccountably slipped off the news agenda and never was on the political agenda, although 600 people were shot in it. And the contrast with this vicious, cowardly attack it's really quite marked, isn't it?
They're both awful attacks, but of course this fits, well, it does a couple things. It plays into what Trump says and wants to feed to his base, and it also works as a distraction for all the problems that he's having with his legislative agenda and with the investigations into, you know, the election and all of that kind of stuff. So it allows him to immediately have a distraction and plays into that card. But of course his ban would have had nothing to do with this person because the person was in the United States and from a country that apparently wasn't a problem until now. So it's just beyond.
I mean, these are words you never thought you'd ever say. You're banned by the President of the United States on Twitter.
Yeah, that was something that was definitely strange. I mean, like a lot of people, you know, I was responding to some of his tweets and trying to, you know, be gentle ribbing, you know, the kind of thing that I thought he would appreciate, considering the way he interacts with people. And then one day I noticed that my Twitter feed was quieter than normal, and that wasn't usual. And then I went and I looked, and it was just this astounding, like, I just couldn't believe it. And then I've since then been blocked by Donald Jr. and Erich Trump as well. Yeah. So I'm working on the whole house.
Yeah,
the White House, apparently.
Got the full set.
It's the full sets. You know, with Ivanka, you have to tread more carefully because you don't want to say anything too...
It is. For you as a man in the field of comedy, it must be low-hanging fruit. First of all, a president who's only scarcely literate, let's be frank, who many times a day tweets, therefore the least literate form of written discourse, and who is so sensitive to criticism that he's not only got time to tweet, he's got time to block you.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with Trump, especially from a comedian, in a way, he's almost beyond satire, because the things that are happening are beyond what, I mean, that's, you know, it's just beyond what we could ever imagine and ever what we've made up and that kind of thing. South Park, I think, said they're not even going to try and make fun of him because they can't create a world that is crazier than the world that we see. And as somebody who does care about America with all of its flaws, when I see these things happening, you just like, when the president tweets that someone should get the death penalty, that's shocking, and it's upsetting from that side of it, that you're not supposed to say these sorts of things. There's a reason and a level that we need a head of state to act in a certain way to uphold some sense of decency sometimes.
Don't you think it's more shocking that he's actually still able to tweet himself and that nobody has taken his phone away from him?
The thing is, it's worked for him, and it's gotten him where he is, where obviously, you know, how can you argue if you're with him? He can't say, you can't let me do this, because it's gotten him to the most impossible place that none of us realistically ever thought that he would get there. And in a way, I think from the outside, a lot of people think, well, how can this still happen? That's the question. I get blamed a lot as an American living in the UK for what's happened with Donald Trump pretty much on a daily basis. People find I'm an American, they're like, how is this happening? Like I was personally responsible. So I have to defend it a lot. And I think a lot of it deals, he's giving his supporters what he promised, which is chaos. They wanted a destruction of the order. Hillary Clinton represented that order, and they thought, we want to take this down. He's delivering chaos by not filling jobs in his administration, by upsetting the world order with our partners and allies, all of those things. He's delivering his base what they want, and that's why it's not like, well, Steve Bannon, who's left the administration, he's happy to see all this happen because he wanted to blow up the world order as it was as well, you know? He's just doing it from outside the White House now.
You say that no one could have imagined, but we're a living testament to the opposite.
Yeah.
We imagined, we predicted on here, on every platform, in public, for a long time before the election, that Donald Trump was going to win. And the principal reason was the one you have just named, Hillary Clinton. You have to, I'm assuming you're a Democrat, you have to face this fact that by putting up the only candidate who could have lost to Donald Trump, the Democrats really don't have that much room to complain because they moved mountains to stop Bernie Sanders becoming the nominee. Yeah. And he probably would have beaten Trump.
I mean, Hillary Clinton had her flaws, definitely. I think that, I mean, my theory as well on who we elect as a president of the United States is the most likable person. And clearly that was not Hillary Clinton on many levels, unfortunately. And that's not, I don't think, being misogynistic. She's just not that dynamic. And Trump, in some weird, strange ways, even though I don't agree with almost anything he represents, is a more likable, charismatic, identifiable person. That's who we imagine. In America, Americans imagine the president coming around their house for a beer or a barbecue. And imagine Hillary Clinton coming around your house. It'd be like a health and safety inspection. It's not what you want to see happen. So that right there, so in my heart of hearts, I was always worried. I mean, I registered as a Democrat for the first time ever. I've always tried to be independent, to help try and support her campaign from however I could, even here from London, because I saw this is such an important race. I mean, the moment where Trump said he wanted to ban people based on their religion coming to the United States was a moment, and I saw some Democrats saying, oh yeah, maybe we should support that. That was you can't be on the sidelines anymore. You have to try and do something. And so trying to stop him from being president, you know, what little I could do, even though Hillary was deeply flawed. And yes, maybe Bernie would have won. but Bernie was never really a Democrat. That's why the Democratic establishment, but I mean, that's why they didn't support him, because he was trying to hijack the Democratic Party the way Trump hijacked the Republican Party. So I see why they fought against him. But yes, you're right. In the end, I guess he would have won.
No, one of the greatest men of these islands, Oscar Wilde, said that we were two countries divided by a common language.
Yep.
I discover that all over again every day.
Yep.
You've got a foot in both camps.
Yes.
You're living here. You're from the United States. How do you see the current state of this special relationship?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that Donald Trump is afraid to come here tells you loads, even though, well, I don't know if Theresa May would want to come and hold hands with him again. I think she's probably happy it was just her hand that got grabbed. But, I mean, obviously it's broken because he knows that he would be, my thing, I would like him to be invited to the UK. I would like him to be greeted at Heathrow by Sadiq Khan, after he's had to wait at Heathrow for about 8 hours to get through immigration. And then I think Sadiq should take him out for dinner for a spicy chicken masala and see if he ever comes back to the UK after that. I think that's the way in. That's what we should do.
It is interesting, though, that you say that people blame you for Trump. It's my, and I mean this most sincerely, folks, I actually like American people. It's their government, their role in the world, their historical role in the last 60, 70 years especially. It's a very difficult duality to maintain.
Yeah.
To love Americans and hate the state, hate the government. Now that you're over here, can you kind of see my point a bit more?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I see the isolationist bent of America. I still, though, I think that there is something special about America, so I can see why people feel that. Having now come here as an immigrant, and and I have a British passport now, and seeing how that transition has occurred, and how people look at me and go, "Well, you're not really British, are you?" And I'm like, "Well, I have a passport. I have children here. I've done everything. I've sworn an oath of allegiance to Queen Elizabeth II and her heirs and successors."
It's more than I would be prepared to do.
Exactly.
Tell us about your tour.
Well, I'm doing the show in London and Museum of Comedy the 9th and 15th of November. So this is the Edinburgh show that I just did, and it's my chance, well, while Trump is still president, although I think he's going to last a bit longer, to try and have a go and explain exactly how we got to this point.
And it's Erich McElroy tops Trump.
Yes.
That has a different meaning in Scotland, at least.
Yes, I realized that after I named the show. It was more about kind of a play on top Trump cards.
Yeah.
But then as soon as I named the show that, I realized some people thought I was trying to say, like, top him in a way of do bodily harm, which is not my intention towards the President of the United States, because that is illegal for an American to say they want to harm the President. I'm not saying that. Please don't send the Secret Service around. But yeah, so I play with that a little bit, because plus in America we don't play the game Top Trumps because it's boring. But yeah, so I named it that, and then realized consequences.
So you can
afterwards.
get a whole show out of Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, you can get many hours.
You can get a whole season.
Show,
you get a whole season
a little bit of therapy, all of the things all in one.
Erich McElroy, we'll be there. We'll be in the stalls in the third row, I believe. Thanks very much for coming on board the Sputnik.
Coming up next, the political power of music. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Sputnik. The political power of music is not as well enough known as it should be.
From Wagner and Hitler to Two-Tone and the Anti-Nazi League, Mandela's birthday bash at Wembley, Live Aid and Red Wedge, music has for good and ill provided fuel for political change.
The author of a new book, Sound System, The Political Power of Music, played for us here once before with the finest of young cannibals, Roland Gift, as well as touring with the likes of Dido and Sinead O'Connor. So he knows both music and politics equally well. He's Dave Randall, and he joins us now. Congratulations, Dave, on the book. It's a terrific read.
Thank you.
Published by Pluto.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, I think, a difficult question first. Is music neutral? Could you enjoy Wagner knowing that Hitler was enjoying it and using it? Can someone like me, who has all Bob Dylan's records in triplicate, CDs, everything, but who hates his current politics at least, should I still enjoy the music of people whose politics are bad?
Well, first of all, no, I don't think music is ever neutral. On the contrary, what I argue in the book, and what I think is true of all of culture, is that it's politically contested. If you have any success with a piece of music, if it resonates with a mass audience, then it's not only your opinions, but those of all sorts of other people come into play to give that particular piece of music a context, in order that it is seen to be supporting their particular agenda. So music and the meaning of music, I think, is pulled in different directions by all sorts of different people. Now, when it comes to the question of Wagner and people with objectionable politics who make wonderful music, I think it's probably a case-by-case basis. I think it's hard not to get carried away with the genius music of someone like Wagner. To give a very contemporary example, I will continue to enjoy the music of Radiohead, even though they decided to ignore the pleas of Palestinian civil society and go to Tel Aviv recently. So I think you can enjoy the music, but at the same time be absolutely critical and openly critical about somebody's politics.
Well, I'll give you an example, slightly obscure. Bob Dylan wrote a song on an album called Slow Train Coming, which most people now pretend was never made. It was in his Christian fundamentalist period. He's had many periods. And there's a song on that album called Neighborhood Bully, which is actually a fantastically good song, except it's about Israel. It's a pro-Israel song. How does someone like me, with my background, love that song and continue to play it? It's quite difficult, tricky.
Well, it is difficult, and sometimes I think sometimes that tension becomes so acute that you can no longer enjoy it. I mean, if you find out that an artist in their domestic life, for example, has been dreadful, I mean, it might simply put you off the music in a way that becomes, you know, quite authentic and heartfelt. You simply can't enjoy that piece of music again in the same way. So I do think it's a case-by-case basis. But
Eric Clapton, David Bowie, they both had some pretty dodgy lapses.
They did. Well, lapses in the case of David Bowie, because he took back these, you know, very dangerous things, that the flirtations really with fascism. He retracted those and apologised for them. Clapton never did. I mean, as we know, I know that you've had Daniel Rachel on the show as well, who wrote an exhaustive volume about Rock Against Racism. Clapton's outburst led to Rock Against Racism, so that's a particularly fascinating chapter. But yeah, he never apologised for those dreadful remarks. But here's the broader context as I see it. I think that, in a sense, pop stars, just like everyone else, will in general reflect in different ways society as a whole. And therefore, if we want better pop stars, we need to create a better society. And actually, if you look at someone, I mean, you could take any example. A good example is Beyonce. Yeah. She starts off fairly apolitical, but actually last year she decided to reference the Black Lives Matter movement and talked in solidarity with the poorest of African-American communities and so on.
Before, she also went to Cuba with her husband.
I didn't know that. Is that right?
Yeah. While they're being best friends with Obama. So that was also very interesting.
Yeah, also very interesting. Now, I don't think this is because she suddenly, you know, a new set of ideas have magically dropped into her head. I think it's that even pop stars, even living those isolated and, you know, those completely insulated lives, even they notice to some degree what's taking place on the streets, and therefore, you know, the bigger a political movement on the streets, in that example, the Black Lives Matter movement, the more likely we are to get decent songs from our pop stars.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's quite tricky, though, isn't it? I mean, a plea for better housing conditions is hard to turn into a song.
And now you're testing me, because I'm sure it's been done. I'm sure it's been done. But yes, I mean, you know...
you have to stick to a broad brush, really, don't you?
You sometimes have to stick to a broad brush, but I tell you what, the most important thing, of course, is the quality of the song. I mean, it doesn't matter how good the politics are. If the song's lousy, no one's going to want to listen to it. The other thing to say is that the politics in music doesn't just come from the lyrics. It also, in my view, comes from the sound of the music and the sort of the context, the broader context.
So this is where grime comes in play, for example.
Sorry?
Grime.
Well, grime, I think, is very interesting indeed. The most important thing about grime is where it's come from. It's the, I think, the honest, outspoken, authentic voice of a group of people who have, for a long time, been excluded from mainstream popular culture. Grime is not the only example of this starting to break through, but it came as no surprise to me. It did to many other people, but it came as no surprise to me that Stormzy, one of the biggest stars of grime, and others, came out very clearly in support of Corbyn at the last election, because they get it. They get that this is a society which is absolutely riven by a class hierarchy. They're towards the bottom of it, and they respect a champion of the working people.
Stormzy was a great hero in the election campaign. And he's now broken into mainstream. He's now a judge.
Big time.
He's now in judges' houses on the X Factor.
Yeah.
Grime, it seems to me, as a genre, is still coming up, still on its way up and out. Others go up like a rocket and come down like a stick, don't they? I mean, you wouldn't do well making a punk record now. And talking of X Factor, all the bands on X Factor break into rap music in the middle of their standard presentation and routines. How long does a phase like that tend to last?
Well, if by a phase you mean a particular genre being, if you will, socially and politically relevant and exciting, I think it depends. I think that some artists make the effort to stay in touch with political and social movements, and therefore they remain relevant for much longer. But they will always be subject to pressures from the corporate industry, and you're starting to see that with Stormzy and with others within grime. And of course, the corporate music industry wants to sanitize the message, to make it friendly for corporate tie-ins and sponsorship and so on. And therefore they will say to Stormzy, stop talking about Grenfell and start talking about your love life, or you know, something trivial. And I think that you'll see this time and time again. The test of a great artist is whether they ignore that pressure and continue to do the right thing.
Well, you would imagine that once someone was so successful and therefore so rich, they could tell their executives, record companies, to get stuff that they were going to make, whatever that they wanted to make. I have personal experience. I won't embarrass the artist, a mega successful, mega rich artist who pulled out of a political campaign that they had joined with us on the basis of pressure in America and elsewhere. And I did make the point to that person, how rich do you need to be? There must come a point at which you're so financially secure, you can do exactly what you want, but it doesn't always follow.
It doesn't always follow. And you know what? We can't, I mean, in a sense, this goes back to the point about we can't rely on pop stars to do the right thing, but we can put pressure on them too. And I think in a way, social media helps with that.
This is our time for it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing to add is that this question of music and politics is, of course, isn't just about the anointed stars of the music industry. One of the penultimate chapter in the book is my Rebel Music Manifesto. And the first thing I talk about is the importance of music in our communities. Community music, local venues, music education and so on. So even if our pop stars let us down, we can at least be nurturing talent in our own communities and enjoying culture in a much more interactive, participatory way. And I believe that's very important.
Now, you're touring with the book. It's a cracking book. I urge anyone interested in politics and music to get hold of it. Pluto Press is the publisher, but are you taking it out around the country?
Yes, I've been doing a lot of book events. I've got a couple coming up. I'm speaking at the Louder Than Words Festival. I think that's next Sunday the 12th, and that's in Manchester, the Louder Than Words Festival. And then at the Right Idea Festival in Whitechapel, the Whitechapel Ideas store, the following Sunday the 19th. And there's various other bits and pieces. So yes, I've been busy.
Have you got a website for it that people can follow?
Yes, you can find this. There's a Facebook page, and also if you go to my personal page, randallmusic.net, then you can find out more information, or indeed plutopress.com. Dave
Randall, I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you.
You're a star yourself, quite apart from being an excellent writer. Thanks very much for joining us. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So Donald Trump made it very, very clear that he wants the death penalty for the Manhattan terrorists. So, but should he? Tariq says, I agree that he deserves death penalty, but if this killer was a non-Muslim, white American, will Mr. Trump ask for this punishment? And Toby Whelan says, that would potentially create a martyr. I think justice will be better served knowing he's locked up.
I think that's absolutely true. The man wants martyred and wants to enter the pantheon of ISIS martyrs. So the best thing to do, he's only 29, is keep him in a small prison cell for the next 80 years.
In American prison cell.
Yeah.
And on music, is music serving the interests of the many or the few? Stephen Emmett says, there have been protest and anti-war songs for decades to zero effect, so far as I can make out.
No, I think that's quite wrong. I mentioned Bob Dylan many times in the interview. Dylan was a powerful influence on the early civil rights movement and the early part of the anti-Vietnam War movement. And he and people like him provided a soundtrack which kept them marching, which shortened the war and hastened, at least the extent to which we now have, equal rights, civil rights in America.
That's right. Well, that's all the time we've got for the tweets today.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on social media, on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today, or on Twitter, RT_Sputnik. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.